So you're having this really nice walk across town, but suddenly you have to cross a freeway. Good thing there are bridges with nice big sidewalks. Except, on each side of that bridge, busy entry and exit ramps with lots of cars. And what about these newfangled designs that are so efficient the cars never seem to stop moving? That could have pedestrians crying foul.
Wait to cross freeway on-ramp. Wait to cross southbound ramp. Wait.
As engineers step away from old, boring designs and try out new, exciting, more efficient ones, do crosswalks really even matter? Isn't everybody behind the wheel all the time? Now that I'm out here on the two legs that God and nature gave me, actually using the crosswalk, I'm starting to have a different opinion. So, why did the chicken try to cross the on-ramp in the first place? The bigger question is, should the chicken even try? If we lived in a perfect world, pedestrians would never have to mix with cars at these busy freeway interchanges. There'd be a space just for cars and another space just for pedestrians. Exactly what Utah tried right here at this interchange.
I did not imagine it being 50 feet in the air. It's actually higher on this side than it is on the other side.
Stephen was fine living next to a highway, but then he got a new neighbor.
They came home one day and found out you have to move.
Pedestrian bridges are great ways to get people over freeways so you don't have wheelchairs and bicyclists all tangling up with the freeway interchanges. This bridge helps elementary school kids get to school. They can walk on quiet neighborhood streets instead of going through the interchange. Generally, it's a good idea. And I say the word generally because, well, yeah.
From the top of the Empire State Building.
Which is what happens when a bridge has to cross over another bridge.
Anybody that walks over that bridge can look into my backyard, see what I have, see what I'm doing.
The goal is to prevent people from having to cross over there in the busy freeway interchange. But this bridge only works if people can get to it easily. To use the bridge, you have to wind through the neighborhood, cross the street, and start up the ramp going around and around and around and around. Then actually cross the freeway and then round and around and around and around back down and then work your way back to the main street. But if you just walk straight across the on and off ramps, it's a lot shorter, which when you're out on your own 2 feet, every step counts. The bridge takes nearly twice as long and is probably twice as far, not to mention that huge vertical climb. So even a perfect bridge might not win a lot of love.
Told them they could tear it down for all I cared.
Besides the height, it just costs too much money to put in a pedestrian bridge at every interchange. There's going to be pedestrians, and they need to cross safely. So what makes some freeway interchanges feel scarier to cross on foot than others? 3 attributes of crosswalks. How fast a car approaches a crosswalk. Slower traffic is safer, obviously. How long the crosswalk is. A shorter one is safer. And do pedestrians have a way to signal to cars that they need to cross? Let's take a look at speed. Even though there are countless designs for freeway interchanges, there's only 4 combinations of ramps. Drivers speed up when they're entering the freeway, and they slow down as they exit the freeway. Combine that with the 2 kinds of shapes. Curvy freeway ramps and ones that meet at a right angle. Because they meet at 90 degrees, there's typically a stop sign or a stop light, and so drivers slow down for these type of ramps. Curvy free-flowing ramps, you can keep going almost full speed. Big fancy freeway-to-freeway interchanges are nothing but free-flowing ramps, which move cars wonderfully. But there are no pedestrians where 2 freeways meet. Where a freeway meets a regular street, there is a crosswalk. Speed matters. If a car hits a pedestrian at a high speed, the person is far less likely to survive than if it had been a hit at a low speed. We can graph these 3 pieces of knowledge. Fast, free-flowing ramps and accelerating on-ramps on the one corner. You gotta get up to freeway speed and nothing's going to stop you. And slower right-angle ramps and people decelerating for the exit on the other. Because it's an off-ramp, you're slowing down for the red light or stop sign at the bottom. But even if the light's green, you still have to make a 90-degree turn, so you're going to have to get down to at least 20 miles an hour. And the others, free-flowing off-ramps where you're still going pretty fast, but you are slowing down, and right-angle on-ramps that limit your speed going around a corner, but then you nail it when it's wide open. You end up with a chart that looks like this. On a free-flowing freeway entrance, nobody wants to stop for a pedestrian. It's curved really nicely for high speed. And when people are going high speed, they don't really want to stop for pedestrians anymore now, do they? So what do? I could bring in a street crossing professional. One might assume that an 8-foot-tall bird would remind drivers to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. But even that's not enough. A free-flowing right turn is just too delicious for a driver to say no to.
Cars are just going and going and going. They obviously see there's a pedestrian there. I have to literally hold out my skateboard like a katana blade and get in front of them to make them stop.
Ken is a regular pedestrian on one of these fancy new freeway interchanges that moves a lot of cars. The diverging diamond interchange. It takes the 90-degree ramps of a diamond and makes them more free-flowing. I explain how this is excellent for cars in my video on DDIs. But Ken is currently not in a car.
Oh, it's so bad. I mean, the crossings, on this side, you have a button to push to be able to cross. And that's it.
There are 4 crosswalks on a diverging diamond. Most of those are free-flowing. No button, no light. Only one is a stoplight.
The cars are getting a red light, and so they will stop.
But at the other 3 crosswalks, you're putting your life in the hands of a stranger who might not even know you're there. One of the crosswalks is for the free left turn onto the freeway, which is a little weird. It's kind of unintuitive. It's something you're not used to having to stop and look to your right for. Well, thank you. But it's a really awkward crosswalk. You notice how the driver wasn't sure what she should do, whether she should be stopping for me or not, because it's not a place you expect a crosswalk. This particular crosswalk got singled out by Federal Highway Administration as an example of a problem. This design was still experimental when it was being built, so there were going to be some bugs. Nobody's stopping for me because nobody can see me.
Can you spot the pedestrian? Good job!
I'm hiding behind the wall, but that's where I'm supposed to wait to cross. And it makes a very awkward crosswalk. Perhaps more appropriately, a drive-through, if you will.
Love that chicken from Popeyes.
This is the tug-of-war between cars and pedestrians. I mean, the whole goal of making this a free left is to keep traffic moving, keeping it from backing up and ruining the DDI. I mean, the whole point of why you put in a DDI is you have a lot of traffic and you want to keep it moving.
I am scared to death of getting hit by a car.
We can compare this with a non-free-flowing ramp. I sent our hired one-chick pony to the top of this freeway ramp. A right-angle, non-free-flowing off-ramp. Traffic slows for the intersection, and when the light turns green, proceeds at a more reasonable speed. Combine that with a button and a walk signal and a red light for cars crossing your path, and you start to feel very comfortable as a pedestrian that you're not going to wind up as Chicken Joy. Only at Jollibee. Crossing is safer, even when you deal with a right turner on red. Probability a car actually stops for you? It goes way up. So why don't we just go back to the old design where all the ramps meet at right angles? As I explained in my previous video, a classic diamond interchange fails colossally when the traffic's too heavy, and it all spills out onto the freeway, and that can cause really dangerous rear-end crashes. But for pedestrians, a diamond interchange is pretty good. Because all 4 ramps meet at right angles, they typically have stoplights, which means a push button for pedestrians at every single ramp. And when we look at speed, our pedestrian risk looks a lot better. But diamonds have one disadvantage for pedestrians. Left-turning and right-turning cars are side by side in one big, long crosswalk. And the longer the crosswalk, the more dangerous it becomes. Crossing a major street like this can be pretty intense when you're a pedestrian. This is because of how massive it is. This big two-way road, you're crossing traffic going in both directions. But if we could rethink the way a crosswalk interacts with lots of traffic, like breaking it up so you cross a couple of little one-way roads, that can make the experience a lot better for pedestrians. Yeah, see, look at that. About 140 feet. That's a long crosswalk.
As much as we love to hate those free-flowing ramps on diverging diamonds,
see, I couldn't tell if that guy was going left or not. So
those crosswalks are pretty short. That's because they kind of are a small one-way street, which are easier to cross once the traffic stops. So if we compare the old way with the new way, it's not abundantly clear which is better. It'd sure be nice if we could have the best of both.
It's Southern Utah's news talk leader. News Radio 890 KDXU.
the sidewalk is in the middle of the road. That's right, pedestrians, when they get to the bridge, actually walk in the middle of the road between the two directions of traffic.
This interchange used to be half diamond, half whatever that is. To save money, engineers built a new diverging diamond interchange using the old bridges. Instead of trying to squeeze two small sidewalks under the bridge, they decided to make one big one in the middle, which you'd think would be really dangerous for pedestrians. Well, you'd be wrong.
So if there are still 4 crosswalks, whether it's on the inside or the outside, does it really matter if it's on the inside or the outside? Well, yes, it does, because 2 of those crosswalks are right here at the crossover, where nobody's legally allowed to turn left or right. Everybody's going straight.
Good old stoplights with a button to push. No darting out in front of left turn ramps.
It's a simple traffic signal. It's relatively narrow to cross.
There are 2 buttons side by side, which is not great for visually impaired people. Of course, nighttime does that to all of us.
It's really tempting to say, well, we don't need to put in any special lights for pedestrians because we have these right here that we put in back when we built the bridge, back when the sidewalks were on the outside. But the sidewalks are on the inside now, so we should put in something like this. This thing here that looks like an air vent. At least that's what I thought it was during the daytime. It has a light in it to illuminate the sidewalk for bicycles and pedestrians.
If you're still not sold about walking down the middle of the street, consider this. Yes, the crosswalks over the crossovers are a little bit longer than crossing an off-ramp, but it's a lot less stressful than crossing a free-flowing ramp. No more crossing weird free left turn ramps. 3 of the 4 crosswalks have buttons and lights. The only one that doesn't is the free right turn, but at least that one's kind of normal.
The chicken tells me walking on the inside has been his favorite so far. He felt the safest here.
Putting the sidewalk on the inside fixes a lot of things, and the chicken can up the score, at least for Cedar City. Here's a fun little side note. Utah didn't just save the original bridge, they decided not to tear down the old leftovers.
So they didn't need this flyover anymore. It's just a relic from when I-15 was originally built. So UDOT closed it to traffic, and they used this bridge for getting livestock across the freeway.
Also open to hikers, bicyclists, joggers, pretty much anybody but, well, her. And this doofus.
I grew up in the state. People aren't always the best at following the rules. Yeah.
So let's go next door to a place that celebrates being a rebel, where a brand new diverging diamond has no sidewalks, no crosswalks, only magic voodoo for cars. Half of it a DDI.
It's been bugging me trying to figure out what this reminds me of. It's an incomplete roundabout.
A clever, albeit initially confusing, hybrid.
It has a stop sign at the crossover instead of a traffic signal. What? What is that? It's the most Nevada thing I've seen all day.
So how are they getting away with ignoring pedestrians entirely?
No going down the middle, no going down the sides, no sidewalks whatsoever, which would be a Except, do you really need to go to the other side of the freeway? All that's over there's the dump.
We're out literally in the middle of nowhere.
And as a pedestrian, I'm not allowed on the freeway, so this fence is up for a good reason.
I can't find research to back up this idea that maybe jaywalking in desolate areas is safer. Acutely aware of every step you take when there's no place for you. I was going to take my camera and show you myself, but I felt a little chicken. I certainly don't mean to pick on Nevada. They did a very good job on this diverging diamond interchange in Henderson, near Las Vegas. The Horizon Drive DDI gets a passing grade from the biggest bosses of all, local residents.
Get rid of red lights and make them all green lights.
We received some complaints at the beginning. After a month or two, they kind of went away, and we don't hear much about it anymore.
Horizon Drive is a new configuration on top of the existing bridge, which saves a fortune compared to replacing the overpass.
I believe they talked to the person who created the DDI and got some ideas and kind of ran with it.
The sidewalks were already built into the bridge, so they had to stay on the outside.
We had to design it in, like you said, retrofit.
But
the bike lane is in the middle.
This could work so perfectly with a middle sidewalk. Wanted to show you, but no bike. So I put 3 caster wheels on the bottom of my tripod, which made beautiful videography. Oh my gosh, this is such an honor. I'd like to thank my Honda dealer. We did it, baby! Because it uses the old bridge, the Horizon Drive DDI's not perfect. In some distant future year, there will be changes for cars and for pedestrians.
But I don't think the DDI will go away. I think it works in that tight space.
This is K-Hop.
So this diverging diamond interchange in Manteca, California is this state's first DDI. But that's not why I'm here today. I want to show you what they've done for the pedestrians. But first, story time. So on the south end of Manteca's the 120 freeway, there are 3 old diamond interchanges that were built to service it back when it was all farms. But that's changed over the last 30 years. During the 90s, housing development started crossing over to the other side. A big mall showed up about 10 years ago. And very quickly, the 120 freeway is no longer the south end of town. It's kind of the middle of town. So it's really important to find a way to get pedestrians from the north side of the freeway to the south side. Even the chicken didn't want to go for this walk. The bridge along Union Road had the same problem as this bridge. It was built for farming, so it's too narrow. No room for sidewalks, not even much of a shoulder here for somebody like me to walk along. A problem worth fixing, not just because it's the right thing to do for pedestrians, but to also meet the city's required general plan. Just about everywhere in the U.S., states have given the power to control how we develop land to cities. The trade-off of that is cities are required every 10 years to create a general comprehensive plan. Includes a lot of things.
Land use, growth management, streets master plan,
Active transportation plan,
truck route, community design, economic and fiscal vitality,
community facilities and services,
resource conservation,
safety.
implementation.
This interchange project helps Manteca meet its circulation plan, getting a pedestrian from here to here. The city spent a lot of money tearing down the old bridge and building a new diverging diamond from the ground up. That meant they could put the pedestrian walkway any place they wanted. And in glorious California fashion, they built this. Total grade separation. So no debate about whether it should go in the middle or on the edge. A pedestrian never has to set foot on the ramp. They go right underneath. The problem is it gets almost a little bit excessive. If you're a hardcore bicyclist, you might not like all the extra mileage you need to go around. So they did try to address that. It looks like they put in some staircases. But first world problem whining aside, there's no doubt this is a safe design. If you made it through about 19 minutes of diverging diamonds, then you must be having fun, right? So let me show you 2 more. Located back in the 3rd most beautiful state in America. Well, they're not putting that on a postcard. Beyond oil refineries, Woods Cross is home to this DDI, it's also a CFI. You can call it whatever you want. I've talked to Utah engineers who passionately defend this as a grade-separated CFI or a DDI. But it has 2 sets of sidewalks, one on the outside and the other in one of the 2 middles. Backwards traffic on both sides, I guess that is a DDI, right? It's not to say it's a bad experience. You have a button to push at every crosswalk. But what's trippy is when you go to the crosswalk on the other side, it's just like a diamond. Which is a weird paradox of DDIs. Sometimes the stranger they are, the better they are for pedestrians. I can't figure out why. There's a more conventional one next door. In the city of North Salt Lake.
Total gangsters.
A clever design which uses the old bridge and then adds a new one to add additional traffic lanes for cars. But while they were at it, they added this really nice walkway to the inside of the new bridge for pedestrians, which I was all set to show you until I got distracted by the concrete work. Look at this. It shows a stamp pattern that, when you're driving on the freeway, looks an awful lot like the one on the old bridge. You know, if I didn't have a diagram showing me that this is the new one and that's the old one, it might take me a few minutes to figure it out. Then this guy decided to try out that new walkway. I forgot my mask, and he's been chasing me. In fact, I think you ended up in one of my shots. I thought, oh, neat, a pedestrian's using the crosswalk. Yeah. I didn't know you were chasing after me. What's your name?
My name's Jeffrey.
Was that your first time crossing it as a pedestrian?
I've never used it before.
Yeah, I thought you were just out for a jog.
No, well, I mean, I am wearing jeans.
Jeffrey is working on a project on Mars.
It's a high temperature fuel cell, which doesn't work well for, say, cars, right? But on Mars, since you've got a vacuum environment, it's relatively well insulated.
If we're ever going to send astronauts, or billionaires, to Mars, they'd have to pretty much fill up their spaceship with tons of fuel so they have enough to escape Mars gravity when it's time to go home.
So the idea is, if you send up a 1-ton piece of equipment and then you leave it for a year, it'll produce 25 tons worth of fuel that you can then use to get back.
The company he works for is helping NASA basically build a gas station for rocket ships.
It takes the carbon dioxide and takes off one of the oxygens, so it then outputs carbon monoxide.
Genuinely a really cool project. It kind of makes helping chickens cross freeways seem kind of simplistic by comparison. Maybe this channel is having its own existential crisis. Okay, the sponsor for today's video is you. The 239 Patreon supporters who paid for it, who I've been meaning to thank personally. Thank you, personally. And if it's not you, well, you did just choose to sit through 20 minutes of chicken jokes.